Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Dave's Faves. And today I want to talk to you about a splendid collection of chamber music, which really it only makes sense to get as a set. And that is the Martinu string quartets on Supraphon with the Panocha Quartet. These are wonderful. Why is it that Martinu's chamber music and his quartets are not considered among the great 20th century exemplars of the form? They deserve to be. They are absolutely characteristic of the composer, splendidly varied in content. There are 7 of them, and each one is different and distinct. They really make a wonderful overview of the composer's work because they run from, let's say, 1918, which is like one of the earliest things we have by Martinu, all the way to 1947. And they're spaced out at pretty regular intervals, at least, or groups of them are. So you've got something from 1918, then you've got the 20s, then you've got the 30s, then you've got the 40s, and you really hear his style. And, one of the things about Martinu, because he was so very, very prolific, is that his music tended to come in clumps. And if you are a clump fan, for example, you might like all of his concerto grosso pieces, or you might like all of his symphonies. But the symphonies all come from the period of the 1940s and later, and the concerto grosso pieces usually come from like the late 20s and the 30s. And then there was his sort of impressionist period and his jazz period. And he worked in different media in each of those periods. So you don't really get a sense, if depending on what you like to follow, of what the entire evolution of his style was. But he had one, and it was profound. It really, really was. And with the quartets, you do get that because you start at the beginning and you end close to the end. And so you really can hear him progress. I wouldn't call it progress because he was excellent in whatever style he worked in, but you get to hear him change styles and within the same medium, all within the medium of the string quartet, which is an awfully convenient way to do it. So the first quartet, for example, is obviously based on like the Debussy and Ravel quartets. It's very impressionistic and very, very French sounding. In fact, I think it had a subtitle, the French. I don't know if that's used here. No, it's not, but I've heard it called that, and rightly so. But then he had his neoclassical phase, which was very, very busy and exciting and full of rhythm and some jagged harmonies and jazz influences, all that stuff. And that basically covers 2 and 3. 4 is starting to get a little bit outside of that. I mean, it's a very short quartet, but it's full of very interesting coloristic devices and handling of the strings. It's fascinating to listen to and really, really delicious. It's only about, what is it like? It's in 4 movements, but it's 12 minutes long or so, thereabouts. Tiny little thing, but oh my, so packed full of incident and color. 5. Now, 5 is one of his great tragic utterances. And he was capable of that kind of depth. He didn't always go there. He went there selectively. But when he did, he really went for it. And number 5 is the one where he does. It's related in terms of its angst and atmosphere to the double concerto for 2-string orchestras, piano and timpani, which has a very, very similar sort of viciousness, darkness, anger, angst. And of course, it was written, the 5th quartet here, in 1938. And we all know what was happening around 1938 in Europe. So it's very, very easy to assume that the emotional intensity and darkness of the 5th quartet is related to what the circumstances were in Europe at the time, as was also the case with the double concerto. But then the last 2 quartets are from the late 1940s, or 1946, 47, in that area. And that's the period of the symphonies, the period where he was interested in those singing syncopated melodies and Czech folk music and those things. But the 7th is a return to the sort of concerto grosso phase of his work, only with only with a nice overlay of that later style. He called it concerto da camera, a chamber concerto, because of the soloistic writing for all four instruments. And with that, the string quartet cycle comes to an end. It all fits on 3 CDs, and they've only been recorded, this complete cycle, I don't know, 3 times maybe, 3 or 4 times. There was the Stamets Quartet that was on Bayer and it got reissued elsewhere. I think Brilliant Classics picked it up, or someone did. And there was an Naxos series, which is quite good. And this one with the Panocha Quartet, which is just simply the best, because the Panocha Quartet was an amazing string quartet. One of the great, great quartets in the great, great Czech quartet tradition. And this is a classic set, a reference edition of wonderful, wonderful quartet music. If you don't know these works and you enjoy string quartets, you owe it to yourself to hear them. You really, really do. You're going to love them. I guarantee it. And I adore this set. I really do. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.